Time to head to the United States for all the latest. Joining me live is Professor of Political Science at Cypress College in California, Peter Matthews. Peter, Marjorie Taylor Greene has again publicly called for a national divorce between red and blue states. Will she face any consequences, do you think, from Kevin McCarthy, particularly given other Republicans like Mitt Romney, Spencer Cox have condemned it?
He absolutely should. This is outrageous to actually call for the breakup of the United States. I think it's subversive. I don't know, that's probably the ultimate one. And you're looking at provoking the possibility of a new civil war and talking about those things. It's outrageous. Marjorie Taylor Greene should go back to doing legislation and actually do some work in the Congress and stop inciting people in terrible, nefarious ways here. I believe McCarthy should be very firm about this and condemn her, as other people have, as Mitt Romney has done, and other Republicans and Democrats have.
Peter, President Biden made a surprise visit to Kyiv on the anniversary of the invasion. Is this a signal of total commitment from his administration?
I think it was very symbolic. He was there to try to shore up the Ukrainian people themselves, who have been facing such devastating consequences with the war over this last year, trying to give them moral support. But it was also provocative. It was both bold and provocative. I think we should really work toward a peace solution now. And I believe the Chinese government, China, has actually offered a 12-point peace plan that might be viable in some cases. And President Zelensky has actually said he will accept parts of that peace plan and work from that. So I think this is interesting that Biden went there. He went there for a purpose. It was also very bold on his part to do it. But it would have, hopefully, I don't think it'll really affect the military alignments on the ground of what's going on. And peace is the most important goal right now.
He had plenty of praise, but he did have critics, and it's not surprising that Ron DeSantis from the Republican Party was one of them. He was critical of the visit, saying Russia's military isn't a great threat, as some believe, and he says the Biden administration's policy is a blank check.
Well, the United States has already given Ukraine about $25 billion worth of security assistance right now in this last couple of years since Biden came to office, and that's a lot of money. On the other hand, it's something that Biden felt was important in order to prevent Ukraine from being overrun. And DeSantis has a point about whether or not Russia has been proven to be as strong as we thought it would be. It hasn't, and we know that. And DeSantis talked about NATO as well. So he's made some interesting and important points that are really important to debate and to come to a conclusion eventually on how to solve this crisis.
A year has marked. A year has been marked in the battle, in the war, in the invasion, whichever way you want to define it. But the human cost is just extraordinary. Well over 100,000 people dead.
Absolutely. In fact, it's a total tragedy that then Ukraine's infrastructure, the human cost and the physical cost of the infrastructure, which means it's going to cost a tremendous amount to rebuild it, and the suffering of children in Ukraine. You know, many of them lost their parents and vice versa. 8% of the Ukrainian population has fled the country in the last couple of years, or since the war began. 8% has fled the country. That's in the millions, about 4 million people. And it's a total human tragedy, and this should have been avoided at all costs, with, of course, security for Ukraine, as well as dealing with the issue of NATO and NATO expansion. That should have been done before the war started, as many of us had urged, but it's not too late now to regroup, and perhaps take up China on some of the proposals that she has made. In fact, I'd like to read to you the first two, if I can pull it up real quickly here. The first 2 points that China makes is, the number one is respecting the sovereignty of all countries, and then explains universally recognized international law, including the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter, must be strictly observed. The sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity, that's the key word. The sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of all countries must be effectively upheld. So in a sense, in putting this down here on paper, China is saying that there's got to be a resolution of the occupation of territories by Russia, and that has to be resolved peacefully. And the second point that's very important is abandoning the Cold War mentality. And it says that the security of a country should not be pursued at the expense of others. The security of a region should not be achieved by strengthening or expanding military blocs. That's dealing with the issue of the concern that Russia had about NATO coming right to its border with Ukraine, putting in their constitution that they would do it. So these things have to be worked on right now after the tragedy of 1 year of loss, tremendous loss, especially on the Ukrainian side.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of hope from a lot of parts of the world to see resolution in that part of the world. Now, domestically back in the US, this is an interesting story. Kevin McCarthy turned over thousands of hours of surveillance footage of January 6 to Fox News host Tucker Carlson. What's his aim, do you think, in doing this?
Why did he do that? Because if he was going to release it, he says he wants to bring about public scrutiny, in other words, transparency, by releasing this information and these videos. But he should have done that to all the news sources equally, not just to one person in one network. And we question that. Also, what about the security issue? What about the issue of exposing all of where the various cameras are, where the security apparatus and people are there to protect the members of Congress? You're exposing that to some nefarious forces, possibly, that could actually use that to their advantage to threaten the security of Congress itself. So I don't think it was a very good move, especially the way he did it, just releasing it right to Tucker Carlson as part of the bargain. It's part of a bargain that Matt Gaetz had demanded that should be released in order for Speaker McCarthy to get Matt Gaetz and the extreme MAGA vote to put him as Speaker. That was, to me, that's not acceptable in a sense.